Stewart Brown has written a book called Majesty in Motion. There it is, creating an encouragement culture in all of your relationships. Certainly in the context of what Moira and Teresa have just been talking about, Stewart, first of all, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be
But,
here.
you know, with all these lonely people out there, all the lonely people, as the Beatles song says, a lot of people need some encouragement, no question about it. But as I'm reading your book, you know, it's a very interesting study you've done here, but I get to page 117, in the context of forgiveness as it relates to encouragement. And you refer to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in the 1990s. Desmond Tutu, I think, was heading that up. And
Yes, yeah.
they were gathering evidence from various people about atrocities that had been done over the years during the apartheid era. And you write about a woman whose husband had been taken, tied up, burned to death while this officer that was being tried and his friends were partying. Sometime later you say they came for her son who met a similar fate. And they're looking for her to help determine what punishment the man should receive. And she just wants to forgive him on condition of three things, she says. First, she wanted him to take her to the scene of her husband's ashes so she could give him a decent burial.
Right.
Secondly, she forgave him of all of his crimes just as God would forgive him. And third, she asked if he would be willing to go to the ghetto where she lived so she could act as a mother to him. I'm reading this, I'm thinking, how amazing is this? And the witnesses in the Truth and Reconciliation courtroom, as she's saying this, began to sing Amazing Grace. How important is forgiveness? I know I'm jumping into the middle of the book, but forgiveness in terms of encouragement. Tell us about that.
Well, forgiveness is a core part of encouragement. When you think of that story about that South African woman, part of the essence of forgiveness, and I think I refer in the book to this in Matthew 18, 21 to 35, where Jesus tells the story of the man who was hopelessly in debt and comes before the king. And the word forgiveness there has 3 or 4 different shades of meaning, one of which is to be willing to pay the cost of another person's debt, which is what Jesus did for all of us on the cross, right? So this woman, in normal human terms, could have said, well, I want nothing to do with this man. I hate you. But she didn't do that. She was willing to allow God to forgive her, and she fully received God's forgiveness, and then she was willing to put aside her anger, her, the feelings she would have as a normal human being, and say, I'm willing to forgive you. I'm willing to allow God to work in me, through me, to you, so that you can be set free, because you are important. Even though you did this to my husband, you did this to my brother, nevertheless, Jesus died for you on the cross as well. So I see you now, this woman is really saying, I see you as Jesus sees you. Not as you deserve, but as God wants you to be. And that's a key part of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. Is that if I say in the book that this is about forgiveness and encouragement starting with my spouse, starting with my family, including in the church, including in the workplace, in the community, that I need to see people the way Jesus sees them.
Now the reason I picked this was because
and treat them that way,
yeah,
of course.
I mean, the whole topic of encouragement can be a fairly academic and even cerebral exercise.
Right.
But
Yeah.
when you get to forgiveness, that's where the rubber hits the road. And it's one thing to speak, kind words to someone, but it's another thing to practice, if you will, what you're preaching, right, in terms of forgiving their trespasses against you as the Lord has forgiven your trespasses against them. I mean, to actually live the Lord's Prayer. Right. I mean, what that does is it really tells somebody that you are of value, doesn't it?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, in the book, I talk about the mind of Christ, referring to the book of Philippians, chapter 2, where it really says in verses 2 and 3 of chapter 2, Paul goes on to say to the Philippians in ancient Greece, he says, you need to treat other people as if they were more important than you are. Not that they are. All people are equal value to God. But you need to treat people, don't just look after your own interest, but look after others as well. And then he goes on to say in that verse, in those verses 2 and 3, he said, treat them as if they're more important, as if they're more valuable than you are. In other words, forgiveness is others-centered, right? First of all, it's God-centered. That is, I need to focus on God. I need to let God, the Lord, Jesus Christ, to be Lord and Master, Director of my life. And then if I do that, the more I become intimate with God, the more that you become the focus, not me. Because lack of forgiveness means that I'm self-centered. But to be forgiving others means that I'm willing to put you first. Because really all of life, and I said to you earlier before the program started, that an intentional encourager is one who is deliberately seeking to walk intimately with God, God-centric, so that I live and act and rest in God, trust God, focus on God, let God lead me and God lift me, and let me experience all that God wants me to experience. And then the result ought to be that I'm focused on serving others. Not serving myself, but serving others. Because if I'm serving you, right, if I'm really dedicated to serving you, other people around me, wherever I am, each day, then in reality, God is going to bless me because of that. So in reality, by saying that it's not about me, you know, Rick Warren says it's not about us, it's about God. But I'm saying if it's about God, then it's about others. And so it always is an others-centered thing. Because we get so selfish about ourselves, and when we get selfish and self-centered, we begin to complain. You know, there's an old Anglo-Saxon word. I understand that the word to thank means to think. So a person who is a thankful person is a thinking person. To be thanking is to be thinking of all that God has done for us, all the blessings we have, so that out of the overflow of my life, I can bless other people. I can touch other people. I can seek to understand other people so that I can pray for them more accurately. And then what I say in the book is one of the meanings of encouragement, which is to inspire people forward toward God and with the Lord.
One of maybe the most famous encourager in certainly the New Testament was a man called Barnabas.
Right.
And you talk about Barnabas in the book. Tell us a bit about Barnabas and how you see his gift of encouragement.